I've never been in any sort of business meeting or proposal board meeting, but I have to assume that if I was involved in one, it would go a lot like this. Hi, yes, I'd like to propose strange idea number 8, but what if I told you not all of my crazy ideas were completely of my own? What if I had some good ideas, and that was called adapting some really good books? Hello, it's Jenna, and you're watching a WWM Productions video, and today this is something a little bit different. Hopefully if you've been following the channel, you've seen that me and Ava have been working on the podcast, but we've also wanted to try other different types of videos and story time. I'm a major bookworm, and even though I co-host a movie podcast, I also really love books, and I just love stories in general, and I thought on the channel, why don't I try blending the two of them? So I figured, why not make a video about movies and about books? So here we are today, and I'm making a video about some books I think should be turned into film, whether that be a TV show or a movie, because I think sometimes there are really good ideas that can add different things to the art world, no matter what type of art you put them into. So even though these books are mostly great on their own, I think they could also make wonderful adaptations and could add so much and be just so cool if they were adapted, and hopefully they would, even though I don't expect anyone with adaptation power to watch this video. Hey, who knows? So I have a couple books that I want to talk about, and I'll just get right into it. So book number 1 on the list is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. It's a book that I actually own, which is not a common occurrence. But I think this book, just first of all, is great, and the book itself is just amazing. The writing, the story, the characters, all of it are just fantastic. But I also think it would make a really great TV show because it's based a lot off of Arthurian legend, and I think with the popularity of shows that have to do with that whole mythos, like Merlin, for example, I know is a really popular show. I think this would also attract the same types of people who like that show. Obviously, it's a bit different. It's a book that takes place in current times. It follows early college experience student Bree Matthews as she grapples with the death of her mother, and as she goes onto the campus of her new school, she learns about a secret society based off of the Merlin legend, and the people in there have magical powers, and it's this whole kind of conspiracy that's happening on campus, and there's monsters and demons and things are happening, and she's slowly getting more and more wrapped into it, and I think it would just make such a compelling show. It would have action, the characters would be really great, I think the story would keep people so engaged, and I would just love to see it come to life on the screen, because I loved how it was done in book form. Honestly, the book itself, if it never gets adapted into anything, this book is like enough in and of itself, but I think it could just be an amazing TV show as well, and I would just love to see where else this book could go. And Legendborn is like such a relevant book for where we are right now, and it has such searing and necessary commentary, and it just has so much representation in it. People of color and just queer people and stories. I think it's just such an important book, and it would bring about so many different people onto screen and in a different type of light. I think another book that would be a great TV show would be Jackpot by Nick Stone. Jackpot is a contemporary, and it was written to follow a girl who lives like below the poverty line, and she doesn't really have much, and she's trying to support her family, and one night while she's working her job at a gas station on Christmas Eve, I believe, she sells a winning lottery ticket, but she only sells about 3 tickets that night. So she goes on this quest to track down the old lady who she believes bought the winning ticket, so she can maybe hopefully get a cut of it because she needs the money. But along the way, she starts getting closer to this boy in school who is complete end of the spectrum economically than her, and the two start to get closer, and they're trying to track down this old lady, but secrets are revealed, it's a whole quest. This book is outrageously funny, but it also has searing commentary that I think is so important for today. I think it would also just make a really entertaining show that I feel like I can picture Netflix like bringing the vibe that this book had to the screen, and I would totally be down to watch it. It was snarky, it was real. I think it's just a show that I feel like people would watch based off of other shows that exist currently. So book number 3 I was thinking of adapting, if I had adaptation powers, would be Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Probably didn't pronounce that right, but we're just gonna move right on there. But Gideon the Ninth is a science fiction, mystery, really freaking weird book that takes place, I don't even know where, just space. Let's just call it space. And it's essentially like murder games, trying to figure out clues and inheritance, and like, it's a wild book. I don't even know how to describe it to you. The fact that I read the whole thing and understood, I think, most of what was happening is honestly a miracle, but I can't even like describe it to you. So I think making it into a TV show would just be like a wild experience. Like, there's casual murder, there's sword play, there's a whole bunch of different family lines that are necromancers. Yeah, forgot to mention that. Just small problem, there are necromancers and magic, and it's happening in like the murder games and the plot thickening all the time. You get people just looking for science fiction and fantasy because you have magic and space. You have people wielding swords, like ladies with swords are always just a win for anyone, especially on screen. Like, we could always use more of that representation. So Gideon the Ninth would be such a fun thing to watch. Like, as hard as it was to read and as wild it was as a book, I think it would be so much better as a TV show, and I would be so down to watch it. Like, someone please acquire the rights to Gideon the Ninth and just, it would be fantastic. If you couldn't tell, I'm trying to do like a back and forth, like one high concept thing, one more realistic thing. So to bounce back onto the other end of the spectrum, we have They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, and it's kind of straddles the middle because while it's not totally realistic fiction, it's also not fantasy. It follows a different type of society like we know it today, and it takes place in New York City, but there's this company called Deathcast, and they tell you the day when you are going to die. They don't tell you the time, you don't know how, you don't know when. You just know that when you get that call at like midnight, you are going to die at some point that day. So it follows two boys as they go about their last day, and they know it's their last day, and they wind up meeting through a different app, and they spend the whole day together. Do they fall in love? Do they really die? I won't tell you, but you know, you can take a guess. And again, this is one of those books that takes place over the course of roughly one day, but it also includes other perspectives other than our two main characters, and it just wraps around kind of just this whole city and all these different people's lives and who is being affected and what they're doing right before they die. And it's just a really interesting concept, and it's also just such a like heartbreaking and heartwarming book. Like, your heart is just doing jumping jacks all the time. Like, am I supposed to be happy? Am I supposed to be sad? Or is my heart just breaking right now? Like, this book is so good, and I think it would be like so good to just watch this too, because I know that there are lots of people who really like stories, but they don't also really like to read. They would prefer to see it visually, and I think this is one of those books that would blend itself really well no matter what type of medium you used. And again, I think this book would just be really just great to watch. I feel like there are definitely like some studios or directors that have this type of vibe that I think you would need. It'd be interesting to see where other directors would take this idea and how would they adapt it and how would they choose to do different things. It's a really interesting concept, and as much as I would want them to like execute it perfectly, I'd also just be really interested to see like how do people tackle this idea. And okay, book number 5. I we're gonna call this book number 5. I don't actually know. Editing will tell me if it's actually book number 5. But book number 5 is Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez. I probably also did not say that name correctly. I don't know how to say anything correctly, but we're just going to move on. So, Woven in Moonlight is a book inspired by Bolivian history, and it's a fantasy, and it has rebellion and plot twists and secret identities, and there's a fugitive thief who's constantly like being like a type of like Spanish Robin Hood, and just all of these shifting identities and alliances, and at the middle of it is this girl who is pretending to be her sister, who is the true heir to her people's throne, and she has to go in her place to be married to this really awful, like just awful human being who is taken over her land. Except as she slowly gets more ingrained into this society, and the longer she keeps this ruse up, the more she actually learns about her own history and the very people that she is trying to re-overthrow. And it's just, there's so much like shifting intrigue and politics, but it's just so good, and this author does such a good job of like writing scenes that just have like an electric current running under them, and I think it would just be so fun to watch and to see this come to life, because there's so much like cool magic, and like the book is called Woven in Moonlight for a very good reason, and it would just be so cool to like see that in like actual effects, and like it would look so pretty, and the world is just really cool, and I think it would probably make like a good movie, because this book isn't super long, and the plot isn't like so dense that like it takes a lot to like figure out. Like, this could easily be a movie that people could go in, watch, get sort of like a whole new history lesson of maybe a different perspective they had never heard of before, and the romance in this book is like so easy to root for, and there's just so much to enjoy about this book that it's such a shame that people don't read as much sometimes, because this is like such a story that anyone can enjoy. So I think adapting it would be a wonderful idea, and it's a win. It's a total winner. And book number 6, if my counting's correct, this is book number 6, Solitaire by Alice Oseman. It's an odd choice to adapt, because this book isn't super well loved. It's also not like hated or anything, but this book is a weird choice because it's very much a Catcher in the Rye for a digital age. That's how this book has kind of been coined, and it very much has that Catcher in the Rye sort of narrator, and it can definitely be a bit abrasive, but I think as a movie it could be really interesting because it's also an older book, so it has a sort of, I don't want to say retro vibe because that's not true. This book isn't that old, but it would definitely be sort of interesting, and it would definitely be a lot different from a lot of like the contemporary movies we get right now. And I would just love to see it adapted because it's so different, and it is okay with being different, and it has like kind of a darker story to tell despite being this coming of age about a girl who meets a guy and is kind of caught up in this weird thing happening at school. Like, it's just, I don't want to call it edgy, but we're gonna call it edgy, not with the more modern and current connotation to it. It's rather edgy in the sense that this isn't the contemporary coming of age that you probably remember reading or watching, and I think it would just be so fun to see some of these scenes come to life, and the characters are very hard to root for at times, but I think that just makes the journey more worth it. I think it would just have that vibe that people of all ages can get drawn to for different reasons, and I just think it's a wonderful story that is just so different from some of the things we have right now that it would just make for a really interesting, and I think the director too can make this book so wonderful in the sense that there are so many different things you could do to really get at what this book is doing, and it could just be so interesting. Definitely one of my weirder choices, but I think because of that, it definitely should be on this list, because I think it would be really interesting to see what a director and a cast and everyone involved in a movie like this could do with this book and how they choose to tell this story. Next up on this list is The Diviners by Libba Bray, and this is probably one of the more ambitious ideas I had when I was trying to generate ideas for movie adaptations, but I think this could definitely work. So this book takes place in the 1920s. It's Jazz Age, there's Prohibition going on, so there's speakeasies. It's a very interesting time in American history, and that right there was very intriguing, but it follows all of these different characters, and there are these people called diviners, and they have certain abilities. The main character is able to divine, I shall say, histories through objects, and there are so many different powers that are explored, and I've only read the first book in this series, but I'm already super intrigued. And the first book follows the main characters as they're trying to unravel this string of unnatural murders that keep occurring, and they can't figure out why, and they keep happening, and there's some demonic presence. And if this isn't intriguing to you and you wouldn't want to watch this, like, I don't know, like, if this can't appeal to some people, I don't know what does. Like, I'm not even that much of a horror person, and I was still, like, reading this book at night and, like, oh my god, I'm not gonna sleep, but I have to keep reading it anyway. Like, it has the horror elements, and there are some, like, gruesome moments in this book, like, ow! But there's gruesome moments, but there's also just this strange exploration of American history that doesn't necessarily, like, cut you like a knife, but instead it sticks with you and you remember. And there's a lot of these subtle messages, and it kind of brings a light to different people that were alive during this time in history, when we generally only think of it like, this is like some really opulent time, like we think Great Gatsby when it's a bunch of white people enjoying themselves and having parties, when this book kind of shines a light on the fact that there were other people in America. And I think it would be really interesting to see all of these ideas play out on the screen, as well as all of these other stories we have. Like, it has these murders, it has mystery, it has magic, it has this grounded realism in historical fiction that I think could just be, put it all together, it could be a wonderful show that I feel like a lot of people either don't try, or when they do try it, they don't do it correctly, when right now we have this wonderful source material sitting right in front of you. It's been around for years. Please do this. Okay, we got one more book. Last book. Final one. Maybe I'll make a part 2 of this if you guys actually like this. If you would want to see more videos of me talking about books and movies, leave a comment, like this video, only if you want to, because if you don't want to watch me talking and gesticulating weirdly about books, I understand, like, I don't take offense to that, but I'm enjoying myself. This is pretty fun. I don't know how editing this video is gonna work out, but it's all an adventure. So they say. But final book is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. It's also an older book. It's in the vein of those dystopian novels that were super popular so long ago. They were so popular that they exhausted themselves. It has that similar hierarchical society of reds are at the bottom. Red Rising, wow, maybe there's an idea behind that. And golds are at the top, and it follows the main character Darrow as he goes from a red all the way up to the gold, and it follows him going through the academy to reach gold standard. But the academy, I was very wrong about what this book was going to be about. I thought it was going to be like kind of like an academia type book that follows the character as, like, he has to go through this really overhyped version of, like, high school. It was not like that. Just gonna throw that out there. It was not that. It was instead the Hunger Games, but a whole lot more war games meets the Roman Empire, and a whole lot of wildness ensues. There are kind of Greek gods. Ah! But this book was such a wild ride, and I feel like it really hits that niche of people who really like enjoyed like the Hunger Games and just like these type of war games and science fiction and dystopia kind of meshing together to form this weird love child of the future and the classics, but it comes together to create this entirely subversive, new, mind-blowing experience that I was just freaking out when I was reading it, and I think like I would have like such an adrenaline rush watching this movie or a TV show or whatever happened, and it would just be so cool. Like, it has like all of these staples that people really enjoy, like rebellion, rooting for the main character, and I know like for whatever reason Greek myth is becoming like really popular nowadays to like kind of revisit, and I mean this book has been doing it for a while now, so there are lots of like really interesting twists, and I think people would absolutely eat this metaphorical show up if it was actually created. And with that, that concludes my list. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, be sure to check out our other content. It will always be me talking about books, so if you don't like books and this video wasn't exactly your cup of tea, we have other videos, like we run a movie podcast, but again, just be sure to check out other videos if you're interested. Thank you so much for watching. We did not watch a movie this time, but in the future, we will again.